Welcome, deep divers. Today we're heading back, way back, to San Domingo, 1789.
Ah, the Pearl of the Antilles.
Exactly. On the surface, this incredibly wealthy, bustling French colony, the absolute jewel in the crown.
But just beneath that glittering surface,
Mm-hmm.
well, it was a place built on a truly shocking, brutal reality.
And that reality, that tension, is what set the stage for something unprecedented.
Absolutely, a society of just immense contradictions. You had this peak of colonial wealth resting on this foundation of utter cruelty. It was almost bound to explode.
And that's our mission for this deep dive. We're digging into C.L.R. James's classic work, The Black Jacobins.
A seminal text, really.
It is. We want to unpack how this place, the greatest colony in the world, running on the forced labor of 500,000 enslaved people, just erupted.
And became the site of the only successful slave revolution in history.
Right. We'll look at the money, the tangled social layers, the incredible leaders who stepped up, and crucially, how this whole story still echoes today, especially for West Indian identity.
It fundamentally shifted how people thought about liberty, didn't it?
It really did. It shows what happens when people push back, even when the odds seem impossible.
Redrawing the maps of what's possible, you could say.
So to get this, we need to grasp just how central San Domingo was economically, and the brutal system it was built on.
Well, the numbers are pretty staggering. It supplied 2/3 of France's entire overseas trade.
2/3, that's huge. An economic powerhouse.
Oh, absolutely. It wasn't just France, either. It was a massive market for the European slave trade itself. James calls it the pride of France and the envy of every other imperialist nation.
And the engine for all this.
500,000 enslaved people. Their lives were the polar opposite of the colony's glamorous image.
And this kind of cruelty, it had roots, didn't it? The source points back even further, to the Spanish arrival.
Yes, James reminds us about Hispaniola. The Spanish basically wiped out the native population, maybe 1 million people, reduced to 60,000 in just 15 years.
Through forced labor, disease.
Systematic destruction. It set a horrifying precedent for what came next with the African slave trade.
It became this industrial-scale operation.
Slavers were scouring the coasts of Guinea, James says, even reaching Mozambique by the late 1700s.
And the propaganda at the time was unbelievable.
Oh, yeah. Claims that the enslaved were somehow happier than in Africa. James just shreds that, pointing to evidence of peace and happy civilization in parts of Central Africa before the trade really took hold. He mentions traders traveling thousands of miles safely.
So the chaos was manufactured?
Often, yes. The book talks about tribal wars being deliberately stirred up using modern European weapons. This led to crop destruction, even cannibalism, people selling their children out of desperation. It wasn't some natural spate.
Just calculated destabilization.
Precisely. And then the journey itself, the Middle Passage, the cruelty was unspeakable.
James gives some horrific examples.
He does, like that captain forcing slaves to eat parts of another slave's body just to terrorize them.
And arrival wasn't the end of the dehumanization.
Not at all. The inspection checking teeth, skin, even tasting sweat, then spitting in their face before branding them like property.
And life on the plantations, the source is pretty stark.
Worked like animals, housed like animals. Simple as that. Even the official rations in the Code Noir were inadequate, meant for 3 days, given out weekly. People were eating raw food or starving.
What's really chilling is how calculated it all was.
Exactly. James emphasizes that the planters knew the enslaved were human beings, intelligent, resentful. They weren't fools.
So the brutality wasn't just random cruelty.
No, it was a necessary tool, a regime of calculated brutality and terrorism, designed purely to maintain control over people they knew were fundamentally human and capable of resistance.
The methods were inventive in their horror.
Whipping, obviously, sometimes to death. Heavy irons, wooden blocks attached to them, masks to prevent eating cane, iron collars with spikes.
And worse.
Burning with wax, boiling sugar cane poured on them, being blown up with gunpowder, buried up to the neck and smeared with sugar to attract flies and ants. Mutilations, limbs, ears, genitals. It's sickening to list.
All to enforce terror.
And profit. It was systemic. James points out planters often just worked people to death.
Cheaper than raising children.
Apparently. Reproduction rates were low, conditions were terrible, and new slaves were always arriving, so they treated people as disposable.
It's just hard to fathom. Yet despite all this, the human spirit wasn't completely crushed.
That's a crucial point James makes. De Wimpfen, an observer, noted their dual personality. Slaves might seem heavy and taciturn all day.
But at night.
They came alive, telling stories, talking, arguing, judging their masters, everyone around them. Whiffen even said, no species of men has more intelligence.
And another colonist, Daubertoy, echoed that and got his book banned for it.
It shows the planters knew the intelligence they were trying to suppress. They couldn't extinguish it.
Which brings us to that Lejeune case from 1788. It feels like a perfect storm of everything wrong.
It really does. 2 enslaved women, tortured, killed, accused of poisoning. The evidence against them was flimsy, just tobacco and rat dung found.
But Lejeune, the planter, walked free despite witnesses.
Yes. 14 black witnesses, 7 white witnesses, even petitions from powerful planters weren't enough. The governor and intendant basically said his acquittal was necessary for the safety of the colony.
Safety meaning keeping the enslaved terrified and powerless.
Exactly. It showed that the system's survival trumped any notion of justice, any law, any basic humanity. Fear ruled everything.
So that's the horrifying base layer. But the society built on top of it wasn't exactly stable either, was it?
Not at all. San Domingo was tearing itself apart. Even for the white colonists, life wasn't some paradise. James mentions the harsh climate, the indulgence leading to gluttony and lasciviousness, a general degradation of human life.
Even their main city wasn't exactly Paris.
Right. Cap Français, the Paris of the Antilles, apparently had streets that were basically open sewers. It speaks to a certain coarseness, a lack of real civic development despite the wealth.
And the whites themselves were divided.
Deeply. You had the governor, usually an aristocrat, clashing with the intendant, more of a bureaucrat. Constant friction there.
And then the small whites.
Yeah, the petit blancs, tailors, shopkeepers, ex-soldiers. James calls them a rabble. They didn't hold much economic power, but fiercely clung to their racial superiority over everyone, including wealthy mulattoes.
Which leads us to the mulatto population, another huge source of tension.
A really complex group. Initially, under the old Code Noir from 1685, some mulattoes were freed, could own property, even marry whites.
But that changed.
Drastically.
Yeah.
As more whites arrived and mulattoes became more prosperous, owning land, educating children in France where prejudice was less overt.
The white colonists clamped down hard.
With what James calls maniacal savagery. Laws stripping them of names, banning land ownership, pushing them out. A desperate effort to maintain the color line.
James links this directly to economic anxiety, using Marx.
He does, quoting Marx on how forms of property create a whole superstructure of sentiments, illusions, ways of thinking. James argues this economic fear, this need to protect white property and status, was the common derivation of prejudice, uniting the different white groups against the mulattoes.
It wasn't just personal bias, it was structural.
Exactly. Embedded in the very fabric of their society.
And Baron de Wimpfen summed it all up so chillingly just before the revolution hit.
That quote is haunting, isn't it? When one is what the greater part of the planters are, one is born to own slaves. When one is what the greater part of the slaves are, one is born to be a slave. In this country, everybody is in his place.
An epitaph for a doomed world, really.
A world just waiting for a spark.
Okay, so we've got this incredibly volatile colony simmering with internal conflicts. Now let's bring in the French Revolution and Britain's strategic games.
Because San Domingo wasn't isolated, was it? He was deeply tangled up with Europe. Especially France's maritime bourgeoisie, the merchants in ports like Nantes and Bordeaux.
They are huge investment.
Millions. And their trade policies, the exclusive, kept the planters perpetually in debt hundreds of millions of livres by 1789. The whole system was strained, full of these inner and outer contradictions.
And Britain was watching all this very closely.
Very strategically. James is quite clear that British abolitionism, or at least its timing and push by figures like Pitt, had strong economic motives.
They saw San Domingo's success as a threat.
A direct threat. San Domingo's miraculous growth was outcompeting British colonies. And worse, the British slave trade was actually fueling French production.
So they wanted to cut off the supply.
Precisely. Plus, they had thinkers like Adam Smith arguing slave labor was inefficient, the most expensive in the world. And they were looking at India, potential sugar and cotton, with labor costing maybe a penny a day.
So Pitt, using Wilberforce and the abolitionist movement,
was a strategic move, James argues, to ruin San Domingo at a stroke by stopping the slave trade that fed its growth. Economic warfare disguised as philanthropy.
Okay, so the Bastille falls in Paris, 1789. The Declaration of the Rights of Man. How does that land back in the colonies and in Paris concerning the colonies?
It lands like a bomb. In Paris, the mulatto leaders, Raymond and Auge, step forward. They appeal to the National Assembly, citing the rights of man, but also cleverly offering 6 million livres to help with the national debt.
Smart move. Were they listened to initially?
They were, yes.
Yeah.
Welcomed, even. But then the white colonists in Paris pushed back hard.
Threatening revolt.
Independence. Exactly. And that terrified the maritime merchants who had all that money tied up in the colony.
Suddenly, principles took a back seat to profits.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Though you did have voices like Robespierre in 1791.
Well,
His famous line, "Perish the colonies, if the price is to be your happiness, your glory, your liberty."
a rare, uncompromising voice.
Very rare. Because soon after, you see figures like Barnave, who had initially supported mulatto rights, completely reverse course.
Why the flip-flop?
Protecting interests. Barnave argued, yeah, the slave system is barbarous, but interfering would cause a still greater barbarism. Basically, don't rock the boat. The Assembly, increasingly defensive about the revolution's radical turn, caved.
And the white colonists in San Domingo, how do they react to even the idea of compromise?
With extreme violence, lynchings of mulattoes, stamping on the French flag, talk of abandoning France altogether. They weren't interested in debate. They wanted powder and cold steel, as James puts it. The whole situation was about to blow.
And blow it did. 1791. The enslaved people rise up.
And not just spontaneously, though it had that energy. James describes them as being organized, disciplined by their collective work on the plantations, closer to a modern proletariat, he says, than many workers in Europe at the time.
How did they organize?
Voodoo played a key role. It wasn't just religion, it was a network, the medium of the conspiracy, James writes. Leaders like Boukman, a voodoo high priest, were politically aware, watching the whites and mulattoes.
And the actual trigger. It's ironic, isn't it?
Deeply ironic. The revolt apparently started on the Galliffet plantation, a place supposedly known for treating slaves relatively well. Happy as the Negroes of Galliffet was apparently a local saying.
Yet they led the way.
A common phenomenon in revolutions, James notes. Within days, the North Plain was ablaze, a wall of fire you could see from the capital, Le Cap.
Early leaders emerged quickly.
Figures like Biassou, Jean-François, Jeannot, they started adopting military titles, organizing the rebellion into something resembling an army.
And this is where Toussaint L'Ouverture enters the picture.
Yes, though not immediately as the top leader. He was older, around 45, had been enslaved most of his life. Described as physically unimposing, small, ugly, but with intense eyes like steel.
But he had prestige.
Immense prestige. He was literate, had managed livestock, likely absorbed a lot. But James is clear. Toussaint did not make the revolution. It was the revolution that made Toussaint.
He was strategic from early on.
Very. He initially offered to help the French against the Spanish, but only if they recognized black liberty and gave amnesty. They refused. He also told them the blacks wouldn't accept the republic without liberty for all. They wanted a king recognized first.
Showing his political thinking already. And the name Louverture.
Means the opening. Partly for his military skill in finding openings, partly, less romantically, for a gap in his teeth.
Things escalated fast. Le Cap fell.
In 1793, yes. A mutiny by white sailors under Galbaud led to thousands of black insurgents pouring into the city, burning much of it down. James calls it the end of white domination in San Domingo.
And right then, the British invade.
Terrible timing for the French, great timing for the British. The desperate planters basically offered the colony to Pitt. Britain saw its chance to grab the richest colony in the world and restore slavery in the old order.
But then, back in Paris, a huge development.
The abolition of slavery by the French Convention in February 1794, it seems almost accidental, unplanned. The deputies from San Domingo, black, white, mulatto, arrive. Belay, the former slaves, gives this fiery speech.
And they just vote for abolition?
By acclamation. The National Convention declares slavery abolished in all the colonies.
Yeah.
All men, without distinction of color, are French citizens.
A stunning moment.
How did the money men react? The maritime bourgeoisie were horrified. They sent letters lamenting the end of their business, workers standing around talking about the rights of man instead of building ships. Their bottom line was hit.
But did this decree actually do anything on the ground?
Oh, yes. Look at Victor Hughes in Guadeloupe. A mulatto leader, armed with the convention's decree and maybe 1,500 men, raises an army of former slaves and kicks the British out.
So this declaration had real power.
Absolutely. It fueled resistance. James quotes a British military historian calling the subsequent British defeat in the West Indies one of the worst ever, inflicted largely by these newly freed black soldiers and, of course, disease.
Which brings us back to Toussaint, consolidating his power amidst all this chaos. His leadership style sounds intense.
Absolutely relentless. Prodigious activity, James calls it. Never resting, handling hundreds of letters, dictating to multiple secretaries simultaneously.
And cultivating an aura.
Deliberately. Riding huge distances, appearing unexpectedly. Impenetrable, trusting no one fully. Yet even his opponents admitted his integrity. Sonthonax said he was incapable of lies.
And his physical presence changed.
James notes how his initial awkwardness transformed into a distinction of carriage, a commanding manner. Power changed him, or perhaps revealed him.
His administration seems quite forward-thinking.
Remarkably so. Insisting on work, yes, but paid work. Laborers confined to plantations, but they got wages, a share of the produce a quarter, James says, and crucially, beating was forbidden.
And his approach to the white planters.
Reconciliation. He protected them, was genuinely kind, appointed them to posts. Many called him father. It was pragmatic, but also seems genuine part of his character.
Combined with real military skill.
Definitely. That story of him outwitting de Sources, capturing cannons and supplies with minimal losses, shows his tactical brilliance. He earned that title Laveau gave him, the Black Spartacus.
And he focused on more than just military matters.
Yes, education was key. Schools teaching classics, sending children to France, insisting officers learn to write. Even older people were learning. He promoted Catholicism, maybe for social cohesion.
And that image of equality at the Hôtel de la République.
It's powerful. Blacks, whites, Americans, all at the same table, Toussaint taking any empty seat, a symbol of the new order he envisioned.
But this vision wasn't universally accepted, especially by some mulatto leaders.
No, the mulatto challenge, led by Rigaud in the South, was serious. Rigaud's was also anti-British, but James says he was harsh on black laborers, favored mulattoes exclusively.
So racial tensions persisted within the revolution.
Deeply. Many mulattoes felt they should rule, resented taking orders from Toussaint, a black former slave. There were conspiracies, desertions.
Though Rigaud himself seemed aware of the contradiction.
He did. James quotes his public statement, asking how he could demand obedience from whites if he refused to obey a black man himself, pointing to his own black mother and brother.
But the conflict happened anyway.
A tragic civil war, fueled partly by French agents playing factions against each other. Toussaint won, but had to purge Rigaud's forces. Executions followed. Toussaint reportedly said, "I said to prune the tree, not to uproot it." It left lasting bitterness.
This leads to Toussaint's constitution in 1801. What was he aiming for?
Something like modern dominion status, James suggests. Self-governance under nominal French allegiance, with himself as governor-general for life. Immense power.
And that controversial clause about the slave trade.
Fascinating, isn't it? He authorized it, arguing the island needed people, needed labor. But, and this is key, the moment Africans landed in San Domingo, they would be free.
A pragmatic, if morally complex, approach.
And connected to his grander vision, the African Emancipation Project. Taking soldiers back to Africa, ending the slave trade there, creating a vast, free and French African territory. It was incredibly ambitious.
But Napoleon Bonaparte had other ideas.
Entirely other ideas. He sent Toussaint a flattering letter, appointing him captain general, but secretly. He was planning to crush Toussaint and restore slavery, pure and simple.
Did Toussaint suspect?
His advisor Vincent, a white Frenchman loyal to Toussaint, warned him about French intentions, sensed Toussaint's ambition. But James thinks Vincent missed the deep, constant, unsleeping fear of white treachery among the black population, including Toussaint.
Toussaint had vulnerabilities too, though.
Yes. His strict labor laws weren't popular with everyone. His perceived favoritism towards whites alienated some blacks. And maybe a fatal sincerity, James calls it, still hoping for some accommodation with the French Republic, even as he was secretly importing thousands of guns from America.
Then Leclerc's fleet appears.
A massive fleet, 12,000 soldiers initially. Toussaint watches them arrive and knows immediately. "We shall perish," he says. "All France has come to overwhelm us." The man who hesitated to join in 1791 now faced the full might of Napoleon.
An existential fight. Part 6. The War of Independence.
Total war. Toussaint throws orderly government out the window. His orders are clear. Destruction and fire. Scorched earth. Burn everything to deny it to the French. Wait for the rainy season, for disease, their deadly ally.
The French response under Leclerc and then Rochambeau was just barbaric.
Beyond barbaric. Rochambeau's tactics?
Yeah.
Mass drownings, importing bloodhounds specifically to hunt and kill black people, making public spectacles of it. The policy was explicit. Kill tens of thousands, men and women.
Yet the resistance didn't break.
It hardened. James tells stories of incredible stoicism. Women going to their deaths, glad they wouldn't bear children into slavery. The French officers tried to explain it away as some racial peculiarity, unable to grasp the depth of the defiance.
And Leclerc's grand expedition began to crumble.
Disease, the malady yellow fever, likely decimated his troops. Fierce resistance from generals like Dessalines took a heavy toll.
And then came news from Guadeloupe.
The final nail in the coffin for French credibility. News arrived confirming that slavery had been restored there by General Richepitons. That proved to everyone in San Domingo what the French truly intended.
Any remaining trust evaporated.
Completely. Leclerc himself wrote desperate letters back to Napoleon. All my army is destroyed. He admitted the restoration of slavery was a disaster that inflamed minds.
This pushed former rivals together.
Yes. Christophe, and crucially, Pichon, the mulatto leader, finally broke with the French and joined the insurrection. Dessalines emerged as the unifying military force,
His symbolism was potent.
tearing the white stripe from the French tricolor, creating the blue and red Haitian flag. The slogan, "Liberty or death, no compromise now."
The end came quickly then.
Rochambeau was trapped, surrendered to the British fleet blockading the coast. Dessalines threatened to shell him with red-hot shot if he didn't. Of maybe 60,000 French soldiers sent over the course of the campaign, almost none survived.
Independence declared.
Preliminary in November 1803, final on December 31st. The new nation takes the indigenous name, Haiti.
And Dessalines becomes emperor.
Crowned in 1804. Interestingly, James notes American merchants and even a British warship supplied goods for the coronation. The world was already adjusting to this new reality.
We have to mention the massacre of the remaining whites in 1805.
James addresses it, framing it not as justification, but as the terrible, perhaps inevitable result of centuries of brutality and the final, ultimate betrayal by the French. The consequence of pushing people past the breaking point.
So Haiti is born, Part 7, its legacy, reverberating through the region and beyond.
The impact was immediate, especially in Latin America. James says when they saw tiny Haiti win and keep its independence, it inspired revolutionaries like Bolivar.
And Haiti actively helped them.
Directly. Pichon, Haiti's ruler after Dessalines, sheltered Bolivar, gave him money, weapons, even a printing press for his campaigns that eventually liberated 5 countries. Haiti wasn't just a symbol, it was a supporter of liberation.
But Haiti itself faced immense challenges after independence.
Constant hostility, diplomatic isolation, economic struggles. A shift from large plantations to subsistence farming. And, as James notes, relentless criticism and mockery from abroad.
This led to a turning inward, a rediscovery.
Yes, the birth of negritude in the 1920s. Dr. Price Mars's book Ainsi parle l'oncle, Thus Spoke the Uncle, was pivotal. It encouraged Haitians to reclaim and value their African heritage, Vodou, cultivation methods, music, social structures, a powerful assertion of identity against colonial narratives.
And this connects to wider movements.
Absolutely. Look at Marcus Garvey, the Jamaican who built this huge movement among Black Americans. His message, Africa has a great past and will have a great future. Return Africa to the Africans.
Garvey's influence was huge.
James stresses how Garvey's ideas spread, influencing future African independence leaders like Kenyatta and Nkrumah. He argues that for West Indians, understanding their African roots was crucial for forging their own national identities. Writing the Black Jacobins itself was part of that project for James, showing the grandeur and agency of West Indian people.
This drive for self-determination kept surfacing in the West Indies.
You see it in early leaders like Butler and Cipriani in Trinidad. Then the 1937 Trinidad oil field strikes. That wasn't just a labor dispute. It spread across islands, shook the colonial system in Jamaica. James says it showed the people were ready for advanced ideas about self-governance.
And the Chagra-Ramas dispute in Trinidad later on?
1957.
Right.
A massive popular movement demanding the return of a U.S. naval base. James calls it the greatest event in their history up to that point, showing people prioritizing national sovereignty even over potential economic benefits, ready for sacrifice.
So to wrap up, the story James tells isn't just history, it's about identity, about struggle.
It is. He connects it to West Indian writers like Wilson Harris, this sense of history living in our blood, the need to build identity from the roots up.
We've covered a lot, from the horrors of the slave colony, through the French Revolution's twists and turns, Toussaint's rise and fall, the birth of Haiti,
to its enduring legacy for freedom movements and the shaping of West Indian identity right up to today.
It really hammers home that history isn't just made by great powers, but by ordinary people, pushed to extraordinary lengths, reshaping their world. James leaves us with that thought, doesn't he? That the work of man is not finished.
And that no single race holds a monopoly on beauty, of intelligence, of force. Haiti's very existence born from that impossible union, proved that.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other impossibilities are out there, waiting for people to challenge them? What historical facts do we take for granted that might look different from another perspective?
That constant struggle for self-determination, for recognition, paid for in blood and suffering, it's still defining our world, the effort to build something truly integrated.